Good morning, students. In today's English class, we are going to take up the third chapter of your English literature, that is homesickness. Now, when I say the word homesickness, I think many of you know the meaning of the word homesickness. Sickness, you all know, when we're feeling ill, not well. And homesickness means like you're missing your home and you're away from your home for a long time for one reason or the other, like the ones who are staying in hostels, studying in hostels, or the ones who are away from their homes due to jobs or studies. So they start missing their home, and this kind of sickness, which the ill feeling which they develop because of that missing the home, that is called as homesickness. Now this chapter, it is written by Roald Dahl. Many of you might have heard this word, the name of this writer, very famous. He's written many books like Matilda, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Fantastic Mr. Fox, and many more. And he started writing very early in his when he was just a boy. In his boyhood years, he started writing that time. So we come on to homesickness. I feel that in place of homesickness, the chapter would have been named school sickness these days. We are missing our school badly. It's been 3 months now, March, April, May almost. So we are missing school badly, our friends and teachers, the going to school, playing there, the sports period, the drawing, and this and that. So, anyhow, let us start with the chapter homesickness. So, I'll start from the first paragraph. It's written, as I told you, it's written by Roald Dahl, the writer. And in this chapter, he gives an account of his early days of hostel when he was sent to study in a hostel. So, in the early days, in the beginning, he started missing his home very badly, and he started feeling sickness because of that. He did not like staying there. He wanted to go back home. He did not feel like eating there, or he did not feel like doing anything there, and he wanted to go back to his home. So he started feeling homesickness when he was sent to the hostel. And in this chapter, he describes how he managed to go home for at least for a few days. He played a kind of trick. He pretended to be ill, he acted, and this way he was sent back home for a few days. So that's the story about. So let us start with the reading. I was homesick during the whole of my first term at St. Peter's. So, St. Peter's is the name of his school, and he says that he was feeling homesick. He was missing his home badly during the whole of my first term, the whole of it. Homesickness is a bit like seasickness, you know. So he's comparing homesickness to seasickness. You might have heard this word seasickness also. Now, seasickness is while we are traveling in the sea, in the ship or boats. Some of us feel very uncomfortable, uneasy, and that we develop kind of illness, and that is called as seasickness. And some of us even have got traveling sickness. We are not comfortable traveling in a train or a bus or a car, and some of us might have seen people vomiting on the way. So that is called as traveling sickness. So this writer Roald, he started feeling homesickness, and the whole first term he missed his home very badly, and he compares the homesickness with seasickness. He says, you don't know how awful it is till you get it. So he says, you don't know that homesickness is so awful. Awful means bad. Till you start getting it, till you have to undergo homesickness. You cannot imagine how bad homesickness is. And when you do, it hits you right in the top of your stomach. And then he says, and when you get this homesickness, it is so bad that it's like you feel like that somebody is hitting you on the top of your stomach and you want to die. So it's kind of a dying feeling. It's so bad. It's so awful. The only comfort is that both homesickness and seasickness are instantly curable. So he says the only good point or the only comfort point in this is that homesickness and seasickness, they are instantly curable, quickly curable. Instantly means quickly. Quickly curable, that means they can be treated. And when can we treat them? The first goes away the moment you walk out of your school grounds. And the second is forgotten as soon as the ship enters the port. So he says you will forget homesickness as soon as you come out of your school and you know that you're going towards your home. And the seasickness, you will forget it as soon as you know that now the ship has entered the port. So, second paragraph we start. I was so terribly homesick during my first 2 weeks that I set about making a plan for getting myself sent back home, even if it were only for a few days. So he says in the early week, the first 2 weeks of his stay in the hostel, he felt so homesick that he set about. Set about means he started making. Set about is mean he started making a plan. And what was that plan for? He started making a plan for getting himself sent back home. So he started making a plan so that the school authorities, they sent him back home, even if it was only for a few days. My idea was that I should all of a sudden develop an attack of acute appendicitis. Now, what was his plan? What was his idea so that he could go back home? He thought that he should all of a sudden pretend, or he should all of a sudden start acting as if he has got an attack of acute appendicitis. Now, appendicitis is a sort of ailment, in the stomach, right side of the stomach. You start feeling there is a sudden and very acute pain. It's unbearable pain. So he says, I thought of this idea that I will act as if I've got an attack of acute appendicitis. You will probably think it's silly that a 9-year-old boy imagined that he could get away with a trick like that. So now he says that you people, the readers, you will think that it is very silly because a 9-year-old boy is too young to think of such an idea, no? To act as if he's got such a big disease, so acting like as if he's got appendicitis. So you will probably think it is silly that a 9-year-old boy imagined that he could get away with a trick like that. But I had sound reasons for trying it. But he says that my plan or my idea, it was not baseless. I had a solid reason, a sound reason to try this trick. Now, what was that trick? Let us read. Only a month before, my elder sister had actually had appendicitis. So he says, just a month back, my elder sister, she had got an attack of appendicitis, and for several days before her operation, I was able to observe her behavior. So he says how I made this plan because just 1 month back, my sister had got appendicitis attack, and for several days, I got an opportunity to watch her very closely, to watch her behavior and how she felt the pain and where she felt the pain. So only a month before, my elder sister had actually had appendicitis, and for several days before her operation, I was able to observe her behavior at close quarters. Now, at close quarters means very closely. So he had got a chance to observe his sister very closely, how she was feeling that time when she had got that appendicitis. I noticed that the thing she complained about most was a severe pain down in the lower right side of her tummy. So he says, so what he had noticed was that every time she complained of a very, very severe pain, very acute pain down in the lower right side of her tummy. As well as this, she kept being sick. And he says, moreover, along with this severe pain, she was constantly getting sick. She kept being sick means she was continuously or constantly getting sick and refused to eat and ran a temperature. And the third thing which he had noticed was that she did not feel like eating. She refused to eat. She denied eating and ran a temperature. The fourth symptom which he had noticed was that every time his sister was down with fever. Ran a temperature means she was down with fever. So these were the four symptoms which he had noticed. One is acute pain in the lower side of the tummy, and then she was constantly getting sick and she refused to eat and she had fever. So that is why, because he had watched her completely and very closely, so he knew how to act, and that is why he says, I thought of this plan. You might, by the way, be interested to know that this sister had her appendix removed, not in a fine hospital operating room full of bright lights and gowned nurses, but on our own nursery table at home by the local doctor and his anesthetist. So he says that one more thing I would like to tell you is that the sister, she got her appendix removed not in a hospital room where there were bright lights and nurses wearing gowns, but the operation was done right at their home on a nursery table, and it was done by a local doctor and his anesthetist. Now, anesthetist is a person who gives you sort of a medicine so that you don't feel pain. Anesthesia, that is called as. So in those days, it was fairly common practice for a doctor to arrive at your house with a bag of instruments. So he says, because in those days it was very common that these kind of things, they were done at home. So the doctor used to arrive at home with his instruments, then drape a clean sheet over the most convenient table. So then he used to select the most convenient table for operation, and he used to drape a clean sheet. Drape means to cover. That table was covered with a clean sheet, and a most convenient table was chosen, comfortable, and get on with it. And he used to get on with the operation, to start the operation. On this occasion, I can remember lurking in the corridor outside the nursery. So he says, while this operation was being done, I remember that I used to lurk in the corridor outside the nursery, the room where the operation was done. I used to lurk around. Now, lurking means waiting quietly and secretly, especially when you're going to do something bad. So I remember I was lurking down in the corridor outside the nursery while the operation was going on. My other sisters were with me. So he had his other sisters also with him, and we stood there spellbound. And we stood there outside that room spellbound. Spellbound means fascinated. That means something which was unusual, which they had never experienced before. So they were spellbound. What was going to happen? What would be the result of it? Listening to the soft medical murmurs coming from behind the locked door. So he says, I was outside that door, outside that room, and I tried to listen to the soft medical murmurs. Murmurs means the soft talk, which is not very clear, because inside the room, the room was closed, locked, and inside the doctors, he could hear the doctor and the nurse or the people talking, but it was not clear to them what they were talking. Coming from behind the locked door and picturing the patient. So he could imagine. Picturing means imagine the patient with her stomach sliced open. So he could not see what was going on inside, but outside in his mind he could imagine that the doctor might have sliced the stomach open. Cut, sliced means cut the stomach open. We could even smell the sickly fumes of ether filtering through the crack under the door. So he says, I could even smell that sickly fumes of ether. Ether is a sort of a gas, it's a kind of anesthetic which is given, so that had a very bad smell, and they could smell the sickly perfume. That smell used to make them sick, filtering coming out of the crack under the door. So we start with the sixth paragraph now. So the next day we were allowed to inspect the appendix itself in a glass bottle. So he says, after the operation was done, next day we were allowed to inspect the appendix. Inspect means to examine, to see it closely. It was kept in a glass bottle, and he describes how it looked. He says it was a longish, black, wormy looking thing. So it looked like a long black worm. And I said, do I have one of those inside me, Nanny? So he says he was so young that he used to see this, and he asked his nanny. Nanny is a sort of caretaker, caretaker of the children. So he asked his nanny that, do I have one of those inside me also? I also have this thing inside me. Everybody has one, Nanny answered. So Nanny told, yes, everybody has this appendix inside. What's it for? I asked her. So he asked the Nanny that what is the reason for it? Why do we have it? God works in his mysterious ways, she said, which was her stock reply whenever she did not know the answer. So when he asked Nanny that what is the reason for this appendix, so she did not have exact answer. So she says, God works in his mysterious ways. So God has in his own ways. Only God knows all these things. And the writer says that this was her usual reply, the stock reply, whenever she did not have the exact answer. So she used to leave it to God. What makes it go bad? I asked her. So this curious writer, curious young boy, he asked the next question from Nanny, that what makes it go bad? Why does it turn bad? Why does we feel ill because of it? Toothbrush bristles, she answered. This time with no hesitation at all. So what answer this nanny gave? She says, it is because of toothbrush bristles. You all know what are toothbrush bristles. We use toothbrush every day. That plastic thing on that toothbrush is called toothbrush bristles. And she answered without hesitation. She answered very confidently. Toothbrush bristles, I cried. So the writer is very shocked to hear that how can toothbrush bristles cause appendicitis? How can toothbrush bristles make your appendix go bad? So that was his next question. Nanny, who in my eyes was filled with more wisdom than Solomon, replied, whenever a bristle comes out of your toothbrush and you swallow it, it sticks in your appendix and turns it rotten. So look at the reply which Nanny gave. So Nanny, according to the writer, Nanny was very wise. He found her very wise, full of knowledge. He says she was even wiser than Solomon. You know, Solomon was a king. He was known for his wisdom. So he says that my Nanny, who was wiser than Solomon, she gave this reply that whenever a bristle comes out of the toothbrush and if we swallow it in place of throwing it out, it sticks to our appendix and turns it rotten. It decays it. It turns it bad. Rotten means bad or decays. In the war, she went on, the German spies used to secretly send box loads of loose bristled toothbrushes into our shops, and millions of our soldiers got appendicitis. And to support her answer, she even gave an example. She says that during the war days, the German spies, who are spies? The secret services people, the German spies, they used to secretly send box loads of loose bristled toothbrushes. So lot of loose bristled toothbrushes, they were brought into our shops, and then when they were used by our soldiers, then they got appendicitis. So, honestly, Nanny, the writer is not able to believe it that this could be the reason a loose tooth bristle could cause appendicitis. So he says, honestly, he could not believe it. I cried, is that honestly true? So he's still disbelieving. I never lie to you, child, she answers. So the Nanny replies that I've never told you a lie. So let that be a lesson to you, never to use an old toothbrush. So she says, so take it as a lesson. Keep it in your mind the whole life that you should never use an old toothbrush. So like a wise mother, like a wise lady, she has taken this opportunity to make the child learn a lesson through indirect opportunity which she got. So see how she has linked the toothbrush bristles with appendicitis just to make that child learn a lesson. So we come to the 16th paragraph now. For years after that, I used to get nervous whenever I found a toothbrush bristle on my tongue. So the writer, he got so scared that after so many years after that, the incident, whenever he found a toothbrush bristle on his tongue, he used to get nervous and he used to throw it out very carefully. So that means Nanny succeeded in teaching the writer a lesson for life till he learned the truth exactly. As I went upstairs and knocked on the brown door after breakfast, I did not even feel frightened of the matron. So now he comes back to the present hostel days. He says, till now he was telling us that why he chose to the idea of appendicitis to go back home, and now he comes to his present hostel life. He says, so finally I decided one day to execute this plan. So he went upstairs after breakfast and I did not even feel frightened of the matron. So he says, I was very, very confident and I did not feel frightened of the matron. So maybe before that, he had a very bad picture about matrons, that matrons are very strict people and all that. But now he says that I wasn't frightened and I was very confident about myself. Come in, boomed the voice. So as he knocked the door, the matron cried out to come in. I entered the room clutching my stomach on the right hand side. So he says that he entered the room of the matron clutching, holding tightly. Clutching means holding tightly. The stomach on the right hand side and staggering pathetically. Staggering means when you're not able to walk properly, you're walking with difficulty due to one reason or the other. And he was staggering pathetically. Pathetically means he was in such a pain, he showed actually that he was in such a pain that would make people pity him. So, what's the matter with you? The matron shouted. So, as soon as the matron saw his condition, the way he was walking, that means he was gradually getting successful in his acting. He was doing well. So, the matron shouted, "What's the matter with you? Why are you walking like that?" "It hurts, matron," I moaned. So, with a cry in his sound, he says that it hurts. My stomach is hurting very badly. Oh, it hurts so much just here. And he says that it's hurting at this place. He was holding his stomach and he says it's hurting very, very much just here. "You've been overeating," she snapped. And the matron, she shouted at him angrily. Snapped means shouted at him angrily that you have been overeating. That means you eat too much and that is why your stomach is aching. What do you expect if you gobble cake all day long? So she says that what else do you expect when you are eating whole day long? You are gobbling the cake all day. You are eating hurriedly. Gobble means to eat hurriedly without even chewing properly. So she shouts at him. She says, "What can you expect when you are eating all day long and you're eating hurriedly? That is why you're feeling this pain." "I haven't eaten a thing for days," I lied. So he says, "I told a lie that I haven't eaten anything for days. I couldn't eat, matron. I simply couldn't." So he is speaking with a lot of difficulty. Actually, he is very clever. He's acting. He says, "I could not eat, matron. I simply couldn't eat." "Get on the bed," she ordered. And the matron orders that you go and lie on the bed. Let me examine. I lay on the bed and she began prodding my tummy with her fingers. And the matron began to check. Prodding means checking by poking with a pointed object. So here she was using her fingers, pressing his tummy with her fingers. She was examining his stomach. I was watching her carefully, and when she hit what I guessed was the appendix place, I let out a cry that rattled the window panes. So, as the matron was examining, and when she reached exactly that place where he guessed what could be the place for appendix, the moment the matron touched that place, he shouted like anything. He let out a cry that rattled the window panes. That means he shouted so loudly that even the window panes, the glasses of the window panes, they rattled. They made a loud sound. Rattling, you understand? Loud sound. "Oh, oh, oh," I cried out. "Don't, matron, don't." Then I slipped in the clincher. So again he cried out very badly and he tells the matron not to touch there. And then he says, I slipped in the clincher. Now the word clinch, slipped in means he had added. And the clincher is a kind of fact or argument that you give, and that settles the situation, that settles the matter, and finally the conclusion is taken. So he says here, at this time when I was shouting so badly and the matron was checking, I slipped in the clincher, the final acting, which ended or which made the matron believe that I was actually sick. Now let us see what was his clincher. "I've been sick all morning," I moaned. So he says, he spoke in a crying sound. He says, "I've been sick all morning. Since morning I was sick. And now there's nothing left to be sick." And he says, "My whole body is in pain, in such a pain that there is no place left to be sick. But still I feel sick." He says, "My whole body is in pain. I'm feeling so bad that there's no place left to be sick. But still I am feeling sick. This was the right move." And then he says, this move, this clincher which he says, and the acting which he did, that was the right step which he had taken. I saw her hesitate. So no, she was convinced that maybe the boy is not feeling well and he is in acute pain. Stay where you are. And she said, and walked quickly from the room. And she told him to lie down and stay there. And he went out. She went out of the room. She had had a nurse training and she did not want a ruptured appendix on her hands. So she was basically a trained nurse and she knew something about appendix, and that is why she did not do much thing. She did not prod much because she did not want to rupture. Rupture means break or burst. Appendix bursts. So she did not want a ruptured appendix. Within an hour, the doctor arrived. So she came back with the doctor and he went through the same prodding. And the doctor also did the same kind of examination and poking, and I did my yelping at what I thought were the proper times. So whenever the writer felt, whenever the doctor came to that place, he yelped, and he says, I yelped at the proper times whenever it was required. Then he put a thermometer in my mouth, and then the doctor put the thermometer in his mouth. You all know what is a thermometer. It is used to check the